This year's lectures, Potent Biology, Stem Cells, Cloning, and Regeneration, will be given by Dr. Douglas Melton, Howard Hughes Medical Institute investigator at Harvard University, and Dr. Nadia Rosenthal, senior scientist at the European Molecular Biology Laboratory. The first lecture is titled Understanding Embryonic Stem Cells. And now, to introduce our program, the president of the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, Dr. Thomas Cech.
Now, there are two aspects to development. I'm going to use the example of human development, and this involves both growth and differentiation. A human egg is about the size of a period in a sentence, and obviously when it becomes a person like yourself, there's been a lot of growth involved. Now, that development then has these two aspects that we'll say something about. In the first case, we can just think a bit about the growth. The growth is very rapid during embryonic development, and then in the adult stage, it's rather slow. It's less growth and more just maintenance. A second aspect, of course, is that cells become different. As the embryo divides, there's a period when cells have to be set aside to make different parts of the body. The exact number isn't known, but there are hundreds of different kinds of cells in your body. In this slide here, we see an adult human in the middle, and around her is examples of a few kinds of cells. You can see a skin cell up at the top left. There's muscle, then blood cells, bone. I'll be talking quite a lot about the pancreas and a cell there called the beta cell. There's the liver, the intestine, and two examples of nerves. So how do these different cells arise? To introduce us to that, I'm going to show you a short video, and that video will show you that it's a gradual process and attend to a very important early stage when cells begin to become different. In this video, then, we'll look at the beginning of development, looking into the ovary at an unfertilized egg. It then gets fertilized by sperm, which travel down the fallopian tube. So here, millions of sperm coming along. Several of them will hit the egg and try to penetrate it, but one will win, as it were, go into the nucleus, and then there's a reprogramming process where the male and female nuclei have their genes set aside to be turned on and off for early development. Here you see early cleavage stages occurring, and this is one of the early growth phases. As the embryo moves down the fallopian tube, it's going to form an important stage called the blastocyst here in a few seconds. Of course, in real life, that takes days, about 5 days. At this stage, then, I'd like to draw your attention to the inside of the blastocyst, where there are cells called the inner cell mass, which I'll be abbreviating as ICM. Those are the cells that make the entire animal. And the outer cells give rise to the placenta and other supporting tissues. At this stage, the embryo implants into the wall of the uterus. This is when a pregnancy is really initiated. And now we'll see those blue inner cell mass cells form a disc, and then as the cells continue to grow, they change their physical positions, their kind of geographical relationship to one another. And you'll see that represented here as this disc gets transformed into an embryo. Those lines represent sites where cells are migrating in and out. And here's an important stage when the three beginning layers of the embryo, the so-called germ layers, are formed, and I'll come back to that in a few minutes. As development proceeds, there's more growth and movement of cells. It'll begin to form a neural tube. Here it turns, and appendages start to bud out. You see the head forming and the eye. And then eventually we get a small embryo, and some months later, of course, this would be born as a young baby. So if I could have the next animation, please. So here we're going to go through quickly the early stages of development again. And then we're going to get to this stage when the germ layers are set aside. The three germ layers, the ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm. So here you'll see then that the inner cell mass gives rise to the entire adult animal, in this case a human. This same process would occur in a mouse, as we'll see a bit later. If we now look at the embryo after the 3 germ layers have formed, this video will highlight what comes from the blue germ layer, the ectoderm. You'll see that it makes the nervous system, including the brain, and the skin. The middle part, the mesoderm, green here, gives rise to the muscle, including the kidneys, the heart, and the endoderm gives rise to the whole gut tube. There you see the lung, the liver, the intestine. And to give one more detailed example of this, let's think about the development of the endoderm, and in this case the formation of the pancreas. So there's the pancreatic bud, which comes out of the endodermal derivative.